The barking started before Callan Mercer even reached the door. It was not the bark of a stray dog begging for food. It was sharp, desperate, and broken with pain, the kind of sound that makes a house go silent. When Callan opened the door, a German shepherd stood on his porch, drenched in freezing river water, shaking beneath the winter wind, staring at him with eyes that seemed to be begging for something far more urgent than shelter. And standing just behind him was Callan's 12-year-old son, Finn. For 4 years, Finn had barely spoken to his father. Not since the night his mother, Laurel, died in a blizzard. And the police officer he once believed could save anyone did not make it home in time to save her. But now Finn was trembling, his hands bleeding from rope burns, his clothes soaked through with ice water. The German shepherd turned toward the boy and barked again, as if he knew the silence inside Finn was more dangerous than the cold. Then Finn broke. "Dad!" he cried. "There are dogs under the ice. They're dying." And that evening, beneath the cracking ice of the Ashenbrook River, Alder had not only come back to save 9 drowning dogs. He had come back to save a father and son who had been drowning in silence for years. This is a story about loyalty, grief, courage, and the kind of love that sometimes returns on 4 wounded paws. So, stay with me until the very end. And if this story touches your heart, please give it a like, share it with someone who still believes in second chances, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from today. I want this story to travel far, because someone out there may need to remember that love can still find its way home. In the frozen town of Holofin Ridge, Montana, the Mercer cabin stood near the Ashenbrook River, where winter pressed against the windows and the pine woods held their breath. It was late afternoon, and the sky had turned the color of old steel. Callan Mercer, 48, was a police officer and the K-9 team leader of Holofin Ridge. Around town, people still trusted him the way people trust a lighthouse in bad weather. He was calm in emergencies, steady with a radio in his hand, and known for walking toward danger when others stepped back. To the town, Callan Mercer was a good man with a badge. To his son, he was something more painful. He was the hero who had failed. Finn Mercer was 12 years old, but grief had made him quieter than most grown men. He lived in the same house as his father, ate at the same table, passed him in the hallway, and still somehow seemed far away. He did not slam doors. He did not shout. He did not say cruel things. He simply stopped speaking unless he had to. That silence had lasted 4 years. Before that, Finn had been a different boy. He used to wait by the window for Callan's patrol car to turn into the driveway. He used to ask about K-9 commands, police radios, and how a dog could find a missing person under snow. He once told his mother he wanted to become a police officer, just like his father. Back then, Callan was not just dad. He was the man who could save anyone. Then came the blizzard that changed everything. Laurel Mercer, Finn's mother, had been 39 years old and worked as a nurse at the small clinic in town. She was the kind of woman who remembered people's birthdays, carried snacks for stray dogs, and spoke gently even when she was tired. Finn loved her with the kind of love a child gives without question. To him, his mother was warmth itself. On the night she died, snow buried the roads faster than the plows could clear them. Callan was out on duty, chasing a lead connected to a string of stolen working dogs. By the time the call came about Laurel, the storm had already turned the mountain roads into a white maze. Callan tried to get back. He truly did. But he did not make it in time. Finn was 8 when he lost his mother. And in the same night, though no one said it aloud, he lost the father he believed in. After Laurel's funeral, people came to the cabin with casseroles, flowers, and careful voices. They told Finn his father had done everything he could. They told him the storm was too strong. They told him sometimes even good men could not beat time. Finn heard them. He just did not believe them. To a grieving child, the truth can feel useless. All Finn knew was that his mother was gone, and the one man he thought could save anyone had not saved her. So he locked the words inside himself. Day by day, he became smaller in that house, not in body, but in spirit. His laughter disappeared first, then his questions, then the way he used to say dad, like it meant safety. Callan noticed every piece of his son fading. He noticed Finn's untouched model police cars on the shelf. He noticed the old K-9 picture books pushed to the back of the closet. He noticed how Finn looked away whenever a patrol car passed the house. Callan wanted to explain the night of the storm, but every version of the truth sounded like an excuse. So he cooked. He cleaned. He drove Finn to school. He kept the porch light on. He stayed near, even when his son lived behind a wall he could not reach. There was one name that still lived quietly between them: Alder. Alder was a German Shepherd K9 with black and brown fur, once Callan's best partner. Finn had never truly met him, not in a memory he could hold. Alder had disappeared before Finn was old enough to remember his face clearly, but Laurel had told stories about him. She said Alder could track a lost child through falling snow. She said he once refused to leave an injured deputy until help arrived. She said he was brave, stubborn, and clever enough to make grown officers feel foolish. Then Laurel would lower her voice, smile at Finn, and say, "Alder always knows when a heart is hurting." Finn had believed her once. Children believe such things easily when their mothers say them beside a warm lamp. But after Laurel died, the sentence became painful. Alder was gone, Laurel was gone, and Callan, the man connected to both of them, was still there every evening, wearing the same badge Finn could no longer bear to admire. At the police station, Callan remained respected. He trained younger officers, answered calls, and led the K9 unit with the same discipline people expected from him. But behind the station, one kennel stayed empty. It had once belonged to Alder. No one asked Callan why he never assigned it to another dog. Some absences were loud enough without being named. At home, winter settled deeper around the Mercer cabin. The Ashenbrook River froze along its banks, but the middle still moved under the ice, dark and restless. From a distance, it looked still, safe even. But Laurel had once warned Finn never to trust a frozen river just because it looked quiet. Some things only look calm on the surface, she had told him. Underneath, they're still fighting. Finn did not know it yet, but she had described him perfectly. She had described Callan too. That evening, as the sky dimmed over Holofin Ridge and the wind moved through the pines, Callan stood in the kitchen preparing dinner. Finn sat nearby in silence, staring toward the window where the woods faded into blue shadow. Nothing seemed different. Nothing seemed ready to change. But somewhere beyond the trees, near the frozen Ashenbrook River, something was moving through the cold, and before the night was over, the name Alder would no longer belong only to his mother's stories. 4 years after Laurel Mercer died, winter returned to Holofin Ridge with the same quiet cruelty. Snow covered the roof of the Mercer cabin, pressed against the porch steps, and lay thick between the pine trees that sloped down toward the Ashenbrook River. By late afternoon, the sky had gone pale and heavy, and the woods behind the house seemed darker than they should have been. Callan Mercer came home from the police station just before dusk. He was still wearing his dark uniform jacket, tired from a long shift, but he did what he always did. He hung his coat by the door, washed his hands, and started dinner before Finn could ask for anything. Not that Finn would ask. At 12 years old, Finn Mercer had learned how to move through the house without making much sound. He sat at the kitchen table with a notebook open in front of him, his pencil still in his hand, though he had not written anything for several minutes. Across the room, Callan chopped carrots for chicken soup, trying to follow the way Laurel used to make it. The smell was close, but not the same. Nothing in that house ever felt exactly the same without her. Callan glanced at the stove. The fire had burned low, leaving only a red glow behind the iron door. "I'll get more wood in a minute," he said. Finn looked up. He did not answer. He simply closed his notebook, stood, and reached for his coat. Callan watched him for a second. The woodshed was just behind the cabin, close enough to see from the kitchen window. Finn had carried firewood many times before, and Callan knew better than to turn every small thing into a conversation. So, he let him go. Outside, the cold hit Finn at once. He pulled his coat tighter and crossed the yard with a small flashlight in his hand. Snow crunched under his boots. The woodshed stood near the edge of the trees, its roof bowed under a thick white layer. Finn opened the latch and reached for 2 split logs. Then he saw the marks. At first he thought they were deer tracks, but deer did not leave deep paw prints. Deer did not drag long grooves through the snow. Finn lowered the wood and crouched, aiming the flashlight at the ground. Large dog tracks crossed behind the shed. They were uneven, as if the animal had been limping. Beside them, dark red drops had frozen into the snow. Finn's stomach tightened. The trail led away from the cabin and down the slope toward the Ashenbrook River. He turned and looked back at the kitchen window. Through the glass, he could see Callan standing at the stove, his back turned, stirring the soup. Finn knew what he should do. He should go inside. He should tell his father. Then a sound came from the trees. It was faint, almost lost beneath the wind, but Finn heard it clearly enough to stop breathing for a moment. A low whine, weak, tired, not a wolf, not a coyote, a dog. Finn stared into the woods. The sound came again, thinner this time. Something was hurt down there. His hand tightened around the flashlight. For a moment, he heard his mother's voice in his memory. Laurel had once told him about K9 dogs that could find people in storms, dogs that stayed beside the injured until help came. She had told him about Alder too, the German shepherd who had once worked beside Callan. Alder always knows when a heart is hurting. Finn had not thought about that sentence in a long time. Now it rose in his mind like a match struck in the dark. Another whine came from below the hill. Finn looked back at the house one more time. He almost called out. But the sound from the woods was so weak that fear pushed him forward before reason could stop him. He told himself he would only look, just far enough to see what was wrong. Then he would come back for Callan. He followed the tracks down the slope. The trees grew thicker and the cabin light faded behind him. Finn moved carefully, one hand brushing the pine trunks for balance. The snow was deeper here. In places, the tracks became messy, with claw marks scraping through the crust. A torn piece of dark leather lay near a root, stiff with ice. Finn picked it up and saw part of a broken collar, but there was no clear name on it. Then he heard more than one sound, not one dog, several. Finn stepped through the last line of trees and reached the riverbank. The Ashenbrook River looked frozen from a distance, but near the shore, a wide section of ice had broken open. Black water moved beneath the jagged edge, fast and cold. At first, Finn could not understand what he was seeing. Then one shape lifted its head. A German shepherd was trapped near the broken ice, soaked to the skin, its front paws clawing at the edge. Behind it, more dogs struggled in the water. Some were close to the bank. Others were farther out, half hidden by cracked ice and shadow. Finn's breath caught. There were too many. The nearest German shepherd looked straight at him. It did not bark. It barely had the strength to move, but its eyes were steady, almost pleading, as if it understood that the boy on the bank was the only chance left. Finn turned toward the hill. He should run back. He should get his father. Then the German shepherd slipped lower into the water. Its paws scraped against the ice and failed. Only its head stayed above the surface. Finn dropped to his knees. "No," he whispered. He looked around quickly. The sled rope from the woodshed was still looped over his shoulder. He had grabbed it out of habit without thinking. Now it felt like the only useful thing in the world. Nearby, a fallen pine branch lay half buried in snow, long enough to reach toward the edge. Finn pulled the rope free with shaking hands. He crawled forward on his stomach, spreading his weight the way Callan had once taught him when crossing thin ice. The cold bit through his gloves. The river hissed below the broken shelf. The German shepherd watched him. Behind the dog, more weak cries rose from the water. Finn swallowed his fear and pushed the branch forward. "Hold on," he whispered. "Please hold on." Then he reached toward the first dog trapped beneath the ice. Finn stayed on his stomach near the broken edge of the Ashenbrook River, the rope tight in his shaking hands, and the fallen pine branch stretched out in front of him. The cold came through his coat, through his gloves, through every layer he had trusted when he left the cabin. Below him, the river moved black and fast under the shattered ice. For a moment, he could not count the dogs. They moved too much. Their bodies rose and slipped in the dark water, their paws clawing at the slick edge, their weak cries mixing with the sound of the current. Then his eyes adjusted, and the truth landed hard in his chest. 10. There were 10 dogs trapped beneath the ice. Some were German shepherds, large and dark against the water. 2 looked like Belgian Malinois, lean and sharp-faced, even in exhaustion. Farther out, Finn saw the pale head of a Labrador struggling near a broken shelf of ice. These were not wild animals. Even in panic, there was something trained in the way they tried to hold position, something disciplined in the way the stronger ones stayed close to the weaker ones. The closest dog was the German shepherd near the bank. He was black and brown, older than the others, with a torn collar hanging loose around his neck. His fur was soaked flat against his body. Ice clung to his ears and muzzle. He looked thin beneath the winter coat, as if he had gone too long without proper food or rest. Finn did not know this dog. He had never seen Alder except in his mother's stories, and nothing about this frozen, exhausted animal looked like a legend. This dog looked real, too close to dying. Yet his eyes were different. The German shepherd looked at Finn with a calm that did not belong to the moment. He was in pain, barely holding on, but his gaze kept moving past Finn toward the other dogs, as if even now he was checking on them. He did not thrash wildly. He did not waste strength. He watched, waited, and held himself up with the last of what he had. Finn swallowed hard. "You first," he whispered. He looped the rope around the long branch and pushed it toward the dog. The first try missed. The branch slipped against the ice, and Finn almost lost his grip. The German shepherd's paws scraped lower. Water washed over his shoulders. "No, no, no," Finn breathed. He pulled the branch back and tried again. This time, the rope slid close enough for the dog to catch. The German shepherd opened his mouth, but he was too weak to bite down. Finn moved closer without thinking. The ice gave a small crack beneath him. Finn froze. His father's voice came back to him from a memory years old, from a winter walk before everything changed. Never stand near river ice if you do not know what is under it. Spread your weight, stay low, move slow. Finn pressed himself flatter against the snow and breathed through his fear. He reached forward again, guiding the loop toward the dog's chest. The German shepherd seemed to understand. With one weak push, he leaned into the rope. Finn pulled. Nothing happened at first. The dog was heavier than Finn expected, and the water fought him like a living thing. Finn dug his boots into the snow behind him and pulled again. The rope burned through his gloves. His arms shook. The German shepherd's front paws caught the broken edge for 1 second, then slipped. Behind him, another dog cried out. Finn looked up and saw one of the Malinois drifting farther from the opening, carried by the current beneath a thin sheet of ice. Panic rose in him, sharp and hot, but he forced his eyes back to the German shepherd. If he let go now, he would lose the closest dog. Maybe all of them. "Help me," Finn whispered, though he did not know who he was asking. He pulled again, harder this time, putting his whole body into it. The rope cut into his palms. The dog kicked once, then again. His front legs came over the edge. Finn dragged backward on his knees, breath tearing in his throat. The German shepherd slid onto the snow with a heavy, wet sound. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Finn crouched beside him, chest heaving. The dog lay on his side, trembling so hard his teeth clicked. Water ran from his fur and froze almost instantly along the snow beneath him. Finn reached out, then stopped, unsure if the dog might snap from fear. The German shepherd lifted his head. He did not growl. Instead, he pushed his nose weakly against Finn's sleeve, then tried to rise. "No, stay down," Finn said, his voice shaking. But the dog would not stay down. He forced himself onto his feet, staggered once, and turned toward the river. Finn watched in disbelief as the injured dog stepped between him and the broken ice. It was not an accident. The German shepherd placed his body in front of Finn, blocking him from moving too close to the edge. His legs shook, his head hung low, but he stood there anyway, like a guard posted at the door of a child's life. Finn stared at him. Something tightened in his throat. The dog had just been pulled from freezing water. He should have run. He should have collapsed. He should have cared only about breathing. But his first instinct was to protect. Then the Labrador cried out from the river, and the German shepherd turned his head sharply. His ears twitched. His eyes moved from the trapped dogs to Finn, then toward the hill where the cabin stood, hidden behind the pines. Finn understood the look before he wanted to. There were too many dogs. The rope was too short. The light was fading. His hands were already aching. He was 12 years old, and the river did not care how badly he wanted to help. He needed Callan. The thought came with a pain almost as sharp as the cold. For 4 years, Finn had trained himself not to need his father. He had eaten beside him, lived beside him, listened to his footsteps in the hall, and kept every important word locked behind his teeth. Asking Callan for help felt like opening a door he had spent years holding shut. The German shepherd gave one low bark. Finn looked at him. The dog took a limping step toward the trail, then looked back. His torn collar swung against his wet chest. A few letters were hidden under ice and mud, impossible for Finn to read. He did not know this was Alder. He did not know this was the dog from Laurel's stories. He only knew the dog was trying to tell him something. Another crack sounded from the river. Finn flinched as one of the shepherds lost its grip and slipped lower into the water. The rescued dog barked again, louder this time, rough with pain and urgency. Finn stood. His legs felt weak. His gloves were wet. His sleeves were stiff with ice. He looked at the river one last time, at the 9 dogs still trapped beneath the broken surface, and his chest filled with fear so large it left no room for pride. The German shepherd moved first. He climbed the slope slowly, almost falling twice. Finn followed, turning back every few steps toward the river. Each cry from below seemed to pull at him, but the dog kept going, limping through the trees with a terrible determination. The cabin light appeared between the pines, warm, close, safe. The German shepherd did not slow down. He crossed the yard on shaking legs, climbed the porch steps, and reached the front door. Finn came behind him, soaked and trembling, with blood from the rope burns beginning to show through his gloves. The dog lifted his head and barked, once, then again. The sound tore through the quiet cabin. Inside, footsteps moved toward the door. Finn stood behind the German shepherd, unable to breathe, knowing that when Callan opened the door, the silence between them would have nowhere left to hide. The German shepherd moved up the snowy slope as if every step cost him more than he could afford. His legs shook under him, and his wet fur had begun to stiffen in the cold. Yet he did not stop. He climbed through the pines with his head low, then looked back again and again to make sure Finn was following. Finn followed because he did not know what else to do. Behind him, the Ashenbrook River kept making sounds he would remember for the rest of his life. Ice cracked, water rushed, dogs cried weakly from the black opening in the river. Each sound seemed to reach into his chest and pull. He wanted to turn back. He wanted to save them himself. He also knew he could not. 1 dog had nearly been too much. 9 more were still trapped, and the daylight was fading fast. The German shepherd stopped near a pine tree and gave a short bark. It was rough, thin, and strained with pain, but it carried a command, not a request, a command. Finn swallowed and kept moving. The cabin light appeared through the trees, small and warm against the blue evening. The sight should have made him feel safe. Instead, it made his stomach twist. Callan was inside that house. His father. The man the town trusted. The man Finn had once believed could do anything. The man who had not made it home in time the night Laurel died. Finn's boots slowed in the snow. The German shepherd reached the edge of the yard and turned back. His body trembled hard now. Water dripped from his belly and froze in tiny beads along the snow. Even so, he stayed upright, his eyes fixed on Finn, steady and urgent. Finn shook his head without meaning to. "I can't," he whispered. The dog took 1 step toward him. Finn looked past him to the cabin window. Through the glass, he could see Callan in the kitchen. His father was still near the stove, one hand on the pot, his shoulders bent slightly forward the way they always were when he thought no one was watching. For a moment, he did not look like the officer everyone admired. He looked tired, alone. That made Finn feel worse. He had spent 4 years making sure Callan could not reach him. 4 years of short answers, lowered eyes, and quiet meals. 4 years of carrying a question he was too hurt to ask. Why didn't you save her? The question had grown inside him until it became part of him. It sat in his throat, blocking every softer word that might have followed. The German shepherd barked again. Finn flinched. "Stop!" he said, but his voice was weak. The dog did not stop. He limped closer, then pressed his cold muzzle against Finn's hand. Finn froze. The touch was gentle, almost careful. Not the push of an animal begging for help, but the touch of something that understood pain. Finn stared down at him. The dog's face was wet, tired, and lined with suffering. Yet his eyes did not ask Finn to be brave for no reason. They asked him to choose the living over the wound inside him. Then Finn heard his mother's voice. Not clearly, not like a ghost, more like a memory opening a door. Alder always knows when a heart is hurting. Laurel had said it beside his bed years ago, when he was younger and still believed every story she told him. She had spoken of Alder as if he were more than a police dog, a protector, a guide, a creature who could sense the kind of pain people tried to hide. Finn looked at the German shepherd. "You're not Alder," he whispered. The dog only watched him. Of course he was not Alder. Finn had never met Alder. Alder belonged to old stories, to photographs he had not wanted to look at, to the part of his father's life Finn had pushed away. This dog was just a hurt German shepherd from the river, a dog with a torn collar and ice on his fur. But the way he stood there, refusing to leave Finn alone, made the old story feel suddenly close. The dog turned toward the cabin and barked, once. Then he looked back at Finn. The meaning was plain enough for a child to understand. Go. Tell him. Finn's throat tightened. His hands hurt from the rope burns. His clothes were soaked under his coat. Cold had crept into his sleeves and down his back, but none of that frightened him as much as the thought of opening his mouth in front of Callan. Speaking to his father felt harder than stepping onto the ice. Another sound came from the river, faint and distant. A dog cried out. Then the wind swallowed it. Finn turned his head toward the trees. 9 dogs. 9 lives still under the ice. His silence suddenly felt selfish, heavy, dangerous. The German shepherd seemed to sense the change in him. He stepped past Finn, crossed the yard, and climbed the porch stairs. Halfway up, his legs nearly gave out. Finn rushed forward and reached for him, but the dog caught himself against the railing. He stood there, shaking, facing the door like a soldier who had made it to the last gate. Finn stopped at the bottom of the steps. He remembered being 8 years old, standing in this same doorway after Laurel died, unable to understand why the world had kept moving. He remembered Callan kneeling in front of him, trying to hold him, trying to say something. Finn had stepped back that night. After that, he kept stepping back. Now the German shepherd lifted his head and barked at the door. The sound cut through the cabin. Inside, Callan turned. Finn's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his ears. He wanted to hide behind the dog. He wanted Callan to understand without being told. He wanted to be a child again, before grief had taught him how to close every door inside himself. The German shepherd looked over his shoulder. His eyes found Finn's. This time, the dog did not bark. He simply waited. Finn climbed the porch steps. He stood behind the German shepherd, wet, shaking, and terrified of the words he needed to say. The door was only a few feet away. Beyond it was his father. Behind him, down by the river, 9 dogs were running out of time. The handle turned. The German shepherd leaned forward, ready to bark again if the boy could not. Finn drew one broken breath, and for the first time in years, the silence inside him began to give way. The door opened with a soft scrape against the old wooden frame, and Callan Mercer stopped moving before he had even stepped onto the porch. For one breath, he did not understand what he was seeing. A German shepherd stood in front of him, soaked from the river, shaking so hard that his legs seemed ready to give out. Ice clung to the dog's dark fur, and his torn collar hung loose against his neck. His eyes were fixed on Callan with a strange urgency, not wild, not lost, but focused. Then Callan saw Finn. His 12-year-old son stood just behind the dog, pale from cold, his coat soaked through, his gloves dark with water and streaked from rope burns. His lips were trembling, his eyes were wide, frightened, and filled with something Callan had not seen in years. Need. "Finn?" Callan said, stepping forward at once. The German shepherd moved between them. It was not aggressive. It was protective. The dog's body was weak, but the message was clear. He stood in front of Finn as if the boy belonged under his guard. Callan froze. He knew trained dogs. He had worked beside them for half his life. A stray did not stand like that. A frightened animal did not place itself between danger and a child with such purpose. But there was no time to study him. Callan looked past the dog, down at Finn's hands. What happened? Finn opened his mouth, but no words came out. For 4 years, silence had been his answer to almost everything. At first, Callan had tried to reach him with questions, later with patience, then with small offerings, dinner, rides to school, quiet company, a porch light left on. None of it had broken through. Finn spoke when he had to, but never in the old way, never like a son calling for his father. Now the boy stood on the porch with snow in his hair and terror on his face, and still the silence held him. The German shepherd barked. The sound was sharp and rough, torn from a tired chest. Callan looked down at him. The dog turned his head toward Finn, then back to Callan, then barked again. It was almost like a signal, not only a warning, but an order. Finn flinched. Callan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Finn, look at me." The boy did, but only for a second. His eyes dropped to the porch boards. "Are you hurt?" Finn shook his head, though his hands told another story. Callan reached for him, but the dog gave one more bark and turned toward the woods, toward the slope leading down to the Ashenbrook River. Callan followed the direction of the dog's gaze. The trees behind the cabin were already dark. Wind moved through them, carrying the smell of river ice and wet pine. A cold feeling moved through Callan's chest. "What's by the river?" he asked. Finn swallowed. His whole body looked locked in place, as if speaking would hurt more than the cold. The German shepherd limped back to him and pressed his muzzle against Finn's hand, the same gentle touch that had stopped the boy on the trail. Finn looked down at him. Something changed in his face. Not much. Just enough. Callan saw it. He saw his son fighting with himself. He saw fear, grief, pride, and years of pain all pressing against one small sentence that had to come out. For a moment, Callan was not a police officer. He was only a father standing at the edge of losing time again. "Finn," he said softly, "whatever it is, tell me." The boy's eyes filled. The dog barked once more, weaker now, but urgent. Finn's breath broke. "Dad!" The word stopped Callan where he stood. It had been years since Finn had said it like that. Not as an answer, not as a habit, not as something forced. This was a call, a plea, the name of the person Finn needed. Callan could not speak. Finn tried again, tears slipping down his cold face. "Dad, there are dogs under the ice. They're dying." For a second, the whole cabin seemed to go still behind them. The stove, the soup, the warm light from the kitchen, the quiet life Callan had been trying to hold together. All of it fell away. "How many?" Callan asked. Finn wiped his face with the back of his sleeve. "I saw 10. I got 'em out." He looked down at the German shepherd. "But there are 9 more. They're in the river. The ice broke. I couldn't pull them out alone." Callan's training took over at once. His eyes sharpened. "How far?" "Below the woodshed, down the slope, near the bend." Callan nodded, already turning toward the entryway. "Stay here. Get inside. You're freezing." Finn shook his head. "No. Finn, I know where they are." His voice shook, but it did not disappear this time. "He showed me. I can show you." Callan looked at his son. The boy was terrified, but the old emptiness in his eyes had cracked. Something was moving behind it now. Fear, yes, but also determination. The German shepherd swayed on his feet. Callan reached down and touched the dog's shoulder carefully. The fur was freezing cold. Beneath it, the animal's body trembled from exhaustion. Still, when Callan's hand touched him, the dog did not pull away. He stared up at Callan with a look that struck something deep and familiar, though Callan could not yet place why. "Easy, boy," Callan murmured. The dog turned toward the woods again. Callan stood. "All right, but you listen to me. You stay where I tell you. You don't go near that edge unless I say so." Finn nodded quickly. Callan moved fast. From the mudroom, he grabbed rescue rope, a heavy flashlight, thermal blankets, and the small emergency kit he kept from years on winter calls. He pulled his duty jacket back on, clipped a radio to his shoulder, and reached for the ice axe near the back wall. His hands moved with practiced speed, but his heart was still caught on that one word. Dad. The German shepherd waited at the porch steps, shaking in the wind. Finn stood beside him, still wet, still frightened, but no longer silent. Callan looked at both of them and felt the weight of the moment settle over him. 9 dogs were under the ice. His son had nearly gone into the river alone. A wounded dog had brought him home. And somehow, in the middle of all that danger, a door that had been closed for 4 years had opened by the width of a single word. Callan stepped off the porch. "Lead the way." The German shepherd started forward first, limping toward the trees. Finn followed close behind. Callan came after them with rope over his shoulder and a flashlight in his hand, moving toward the dark river where 9 lives were still waiting beneath the cracking ice. Callan had already taken 2 steps off the porch when the German shepherd stumbled. The dog's front legs buckled in the snow, and for a second, His body folded as if the strength that had carried him back from the river had finally run out. Finn gasped and reached for him, but Callan was faster. He dropped the coil of rescue rope from his shoulder and caught the dog before he could fall hard against the porch steps. "Easy," Callan said, lowering him gently onto the snow-dusted boards. "Easy, boy." The dog tried to rise again at once. His head turned toward the woods, toward the river, toward the 9 dogs still trapped beneath the ice. Even half frozen and shaking, he was trying to lead them back. Callan had seen courage in dogs before. He had seen K9s work through storms, smoke, sirens, and fear. But this was different. This dog had already done more than his body should have allowed. He had pulled himself from freezing water, brought Finn home, and now he was still fighting to return to the river. Finn stood beside him, pale and trembling. "He won't stop," he said, his voice small but clear. "He keeps trying to go back." Callan looked at his son, still stunned by the sound of him speaking. Then he looked down at the dog. "Because he knows there are others," he said. He knelt fully this time and reached for the torn collar hanging loose around the German shepherd's neck. It was cracked, stiff with ice, and partly buried under wet fur. Callan only meant to check whether there was a tag, a number, anything that could tell him where the dog had come from. His fingers brushed away mud, ice, and river grit. Then he stopped. There were letters beneath the dirt. Not many, just 3, carved into an old strip of leather and nearly hidden where the collar had torn. ALD. Callan's hand went still. For a moment, the cold seemed to disappear. The porch, the trees, Finn's frightened breathing, even the distant river, all of it pulled away. Callan stared at those 3 letters as if they had risen from a grave. No, it could not be. He leaned closer, wiping the collar with his thumb until the letters showed more clearly. The leather was old. The stitching was not standard issue anymore, but Callan knew it. He knew the way the name had been carved by hand after the official tag had once snapped during a search call. He knew because Laurel had laughed when she saw it and said Alder deserved something less plain than a department number. Callan's throat tightened. He lifted his eyes to the dog's face. The German shepherd watched him. Older now, thinner, worn down by years Callan knew nothing about. The strong neck was narrower, the muzzle carried gray. The body had scars hidden beneath wet fur and ice, but the eyes were the same, steady, alert, waiting for the next command even when pain had nearly taken everything else. Callan moved his hand carefully to the dog's left ear. There, just behind it, beneath the wet fur, was a small raised scar. Callan remembered that scar. Alder had gotten it years earlier during a mountain rescue, long before Finn could remember him. A missing hiker had been trapped in a ravine after a late-season snowstorm. Alder had found him before the search team did. On the way down, a loose branch had cut him near the ear, and Callan had carried him half a mile back to the truck, while Alder kept trying to limp beside him instead. Callan had never forgotten that scar. His breath caught. "Alder," he whispered. The dog's ears lifted. It was slight, almost nothing, but Callan saw it. The German shepherd raised his head, and something passed between them that no one else on that porch could have understood. Years of commands, patrols, search calls, cold mornings, dark roads, trust built without speeches, trust built one step, one scent, one rescue at a time. "Alder," Callan said again, softer now. The dog leaned forward and pressed his forehead against Callan's chest. Callan closed one hand over the back of his neck, not tightly, just enough to feel that he was real. For years, he had believed Alder was gone, lost during the same investigation that had broken so much of his life. He had searched until the trail vanished. He had blamed himself for losing his partner, just as he blamed himself for not reaching Laurel in time. Now, Alder was here, not safe, not healed, not untouched by what had happened, but alive. Behind them, Finn said nothing at first. He simply stared. His face shifted slowly from fear to confusion, then to a kind of wonder that made him look younger than 12. "That's," Finn swallowed. "That's Alder?" Callan turned toward him. The answer felt too large for his voice, but he gave it anyway. "Yes." Finn looked down at the dog. "Mom's Alder?" Callan nodded. The words struck the porch like a bell neither of them had heard in years. Mom's Alder, not just a police dog, not just Callan's lost K9. Alder was the name Laurel had carried into bedtime stories, the dog she had described with a smile, the dog Finn had never met, but somehow already knew in the tender corners of memory. A legend had stepped out of the cold and stood shaking between father and son. Finn crouched slowly. He did not touch Alder at first. He only looked at him, as if afraid the dog might disappear if he moved too quickly. "My mom said," Finn began, then stopped. Callan waited. Finn's eyes stayed on Alder. "She said you always knew when a heart was hurting." Alder turned his head toward Finn. The movement was small, but it was enough. The dog's tired eyes settled on the boy, and Finn's face crumpled for one brief second before he fought it back. Callan saw it. Alder had seen it first. For the first time in 4 years, Callan did not feel completely alone in trying to reach his son. Then a faint cry drifted up from the river. Alder heard it too. His head snapped toward the trees. He tried to stand, but his legs shook badly beneath him. "No," Callan said. "You're not leading from the front this time." Alder gave a weak bark. Callan almost smiled through the ache in his chest. "Still stubborn?" He pulled one of the thermal blankets from his rescue pack and wrapped it quickly around Alder's shoulders. The dog resisted for a second, then allowed it, though his eyes never left the woods. Callan checked his breathing, his pause, the torn skin around the collar. There would be time to treat him properly later. Right now, there were 9 more dogs under the ice. Callan stood and picked up the rescue rope again. He handed Finn the heavy flashlight. "Stay behind me. Keep the light on the riverbank. If I tell you to stop, you stop." Finn nodded. This time, he did not look away. Callan looked down at Alder. "Can you show us?" Alder took one careful step off the porch, then another. He was weak, wrapped in a blanket, and barely steady on his feet. But when he turned toward the trees, there was purpose in him again. Finn moved beside him, close enough to help if he fell. Callan followed with the rope, the ice axe, and a storm of old grief rising behind his ribs. Alder had come back from the dead, with 9 lives still calling from the river. And for the first time since Laurel's death, Callan felt that the past had not returned only to haunt them. Maybe it had returned to lead them home. Alder led them back through the pines with the stubborn strength of a dog who had already spent every breath he owned, then borrowed a little more. The thermal blanket slipped once from his shoulders, but he did not stop. Finn moved beside him, one hand ready to steady him if he fell. Callan followed close behind with the rescue rope over his shoulder, an ice axe in one hand, and the heavy flashlight beam cutting through the trees ahead. The cries from the river grew louder as they reached the slope. Finn heard them before he saw the water. Weak whines, scraping claws, the sound of ice shifting under pressure. His stomach tightened, but this time he was not alone. Callan was there. Alder was there. The cabin light was behind them, but help was finally moving toward the river. When they broke through the last line of trees, Callan stopped for 1 second to read the scene. The Ashenbrook River had split open near the bank, leaving a dark, jagged hole in the ice. 9 dogs were still trapped in the freezing water. 2 German shepherds clung near the broken edge. A Labrador struggled farther left, its pale head barely above the surface. A Belgian Malinois had wedged one paw against a cracked shelf, but kept slipping lower. The others were scattered between broken ice and rushing black current. Callan's face changed. The father in him had been afraid. The police officer in him took over. "Finn, stay behind me," he said. "Do exactly what I tell you." Finn nodded, gripping the flashlight with both hands. Callan tied one end of the rescue rope around a thick pine trunk near the bank. He pulled hard twice to test it, then made a second loop. "You keep this line clear, no wrapping it around your hand. If it jerks, let it slide first. Understand?" "I understand," Finn said. Alder gave a rough bark from the right side of the bank. He was standing near a patch of snow where the ice looked safer. His nose pointed toward the closest shepherd. Callan glanced over and understood at once. Even weak, Alder was marking the best approach. "Good boy," Callan murmured. He moved low toward the first dog, spreading his weight over the snow-covered ice near the edge. Finn held the flashlight steady, though his arms shook from cold and fear. Callan slid the rope loop across the surface, guiding it toward the dog's chest. "Come on," he said calmly. "Easy now." The German shepherd caught the rope with one front leg. Callan tightened the loop and pulled. The dog was heavy with water, but Callan knew how to pull without wasting strength. He leaned back, braced his boots, and hauled steadily. Finn stepped back with the rope, helping keep tension as Callan had shown him. The shepherd slid onto the snow, coughing and trembling. "Won," Callan said. He did not celebrate. There was no time. Alder barked again, this time toward the Labrador. Finn swung the light left. The beam caught the dog's pale face just as it slipped under for half a second and came back up weakly. Callan moved fast. "Finn, light on the water. Keep it there." Finn obeyed. The Labrador was farther out. Callan could not safely reach it from the same angle. He shifted along the bank, testing each step. The ice cracked under his left boot, and Finn's breath caught. "Dad!" "I'm all right," Callan said, voice steady. "Watch the line." Alder moved too close to the edge, trying to follow. Finn reached out quickly. "No, Alder, stay back." For once, the old K9 listened. He stopped, but his eyes stayed locked on the river. Callan threw the rope. The first throw fell short. The second landed close enough for the Labrador to catch with its front legs. Callan pulled, but the current dragged the dog sideways. Finn saw the rope cutting across a sharp piece of ice. "It's catching!" Finn shouted. Callan looked and changed direction at once. "Move left, slowly." Finn stepped left, guiding the rope away from the jagged edge. Together they pulled. The Labrador came free with a sudden rush, sliding onto the bank in a spray of water and ice. Finn dropped beside it and threw a blanket over its shaking body. "Two," Callan said. The next minutes blurred into cold, breath, rope, and command. Callan showed Finn where to stand, when to pull, when to stop, and how to read the thin white line spreading across the ice. Finn listened to every word. There was no room for old anger here. The river punished hesitation. The dogs needed both of them. Alder stayed in motion along the bank. He could not pull much, and every few steps made his legs shake, but he did what he could. He barked when a dog slipped. He blocked Finn twice when the boy stepped too close to weak ice. Once, when Finn tried to move around him, Alder pressed his body sideways against the boy's knees and refused to let him pass. Finn looked down at him, startled. Alder stared back as if to say, "Not there." A sharp crack split the air. A section of ice near Callan's feet broke loose, and his right leg dropped through to the knee. He caught himself with the ice axe, but the current pulled hard beneath him. Finn's heart seemed to stop. "Callan!" he shouted, forgetting everything except fear. Callan gripped the axe handle, jaw tight. "Finn, pull the line, now." Finn grabbed the rope and pulled with everything he had. The line jerked against the pine anchor. Alder lunged forward and clamped his teeth onto the rope below Finn's hands. His injured body shook from the effort, but he dug his paws into the snow and pulled backward. For a terrible moment, nothing moved. Then Callan's leg came free of the water. Finn pulled again. Alder pulled with him. Callan dragged himself back from the broken edge and rolled onto the bank, breathing hard, his pant leg freezing almost immediately. Finn fell to his knees beside him. "Dad, are you okay?" Callan looked at him. The word had come out again, not forced, not broken, just real. "I'm okay," Callan said, and placed one hand briefly on Finn's shoulder. "You did good." Alder released the rope and leaned against Finn's side, panting hard. Finn wrapped one arm around the dog without thinking. For 1 second, the three of them stayed like that on the frozen bank, held together by fear, relief, and the sound of 9 years of silence losing its grip. Then another dog cried from the water. Callan pushed himself up. "We finish this." They did. One by one, they pulled the remaining dogs from the Ashenbrook. A Malinois came out shaking but alive. Then another shepherd. Then 2 more dogs from under a cracked shelf near the bank. Each rescue left Callan more exhausted and Finn more soaked. But the pile of blankets on the snow grew warmer with breathing bodies. Alder moved between them like an old captain checking his team, touching noses, nudging blankets, refusing to rest until the last dog was free. When the final dog was dragged onto the bank, the river seemed suddenly louder without the cries. Callan stood bent over, hands on his knees. Finn sat in the snow beside the rescued dogs, chest heaving, tears freezing on his cheeks before he could wipe them away. Alder limped to the edge of the group and lowered himself beside Finn. The old K9 rested his head on the boy's leg. Finn looked at Callan across the snow. For the first time in years, he did not look away. He understood something there beside the broken river. Alder had not only pulled dogs from the ice. He had pulled Callan back from danger. He had pulled Finn back toward his father. And somehow, in the coldest place Finn had ever stood, a small warmth had begun to return. Getting 10 freezing dogs back to the Mercer cabin took every bit of strength Callan and Finn had left. Callan moved first, carrying the weakest Labrador wrapped in a thermal blanket. Finn followed with the flashlight, guiding the path, while Alder limped beside him. The other rescued dogs stumbled after them in broken lines, too tired to run, too cold to do anything, except trust the people leading them away from the river. By the time they reached the cabin, the warm kitchen light looked almost unreal. Callan pushed the door open with his shoulder and cleared space fast. The dinner he had been making sat forgotten on the stove. The soup had gone quiet in the pot, but the room still smelled faintly of chicken, thyme, and home. For the first time that evening, Finn noticed how warm the house was. "Blankets," Callan said. "Everyone we have." Finn moved without hesitation. He ran to the hallway closet and pulled down quilts, towels, old coats, anything thick enough to hold heat. Callan spread them across the living room floor, turning the space near the fireplace into a small rescue station. One by one, the dogs were brought inside and placed near the heat, but not too close. Callan knew cold shock could be dangerous. He worked carefully, his voice steady. "Slow warmth," he told Finn. "Don't rush it. Dry them first, then wrap them." Finn nodded and knelt beside the first dog, the pale Labrador he had seen struggling under the ice. The dog was shaking hard, but alive. Finn rubbed a towel along its back, then tucked a blanket around its body. His hands hurt from the rope burns, but he did not stop. For years, silence had made him feel useless. Now there was work to do, and every small action mattered. Alder lowered himself near the fireplace, but he did not sleep. He watched the room like a tired captain counting his team. Whenever one of the dogs whimpered, he lifted his head. When a young Malinois began to tremble harder, Alder pushed himself up, crossed the rug on unsteady legs, and nudged a folded blanket closer with his muzzle. Finn saw it. "You're the worst one here," he whispered, "and you're still taking care of them." Alder looked at him, then rested his chin near the Malinois as if that answered everything. Callan heard Finn speak, but did not interrupt. The sound of his son's voice in the room felt fragile, like a flame that needed shelter. He kept working. He checked paws for cuts, wrapped trembling bodies, and listened to breathing. Some dogs were older, some were young, all of them wore broken collars. That was when Callan noticed the first mark. He was examining a German shepherd's collar when his thumb passed over a rough patch in the leather. Something had been scraped away. Not torn, not worn down by age. Scraped deliberately. He leaned closer and turned the collar toward the light. The identification number was gone. Callan's eyes narrowed. He checked another collar. Same thing. The stamped number had been cut out, leaving only a raw, pale scar in the leather. On a third dog, the metal tag had been removed entirely, but the ring was still there, bent open with force. Finn watched from beside Alder. "What does that mean?" "It means someone didn't want these dogs identified," Callan said. The warmth in the room seemed to change. The dogs were no longer only survivors of an accident. They were evidence. Callan moved from one dog to the next, careful but faster now. On the inside of one collar, he found a faded county mark from a search and rescue unit 2 towns over. On another, a training patch had been partly cut away, but enough remained for Callan to recognize a K9 service code. These dogs had belonged somewhere. Someone had trained them. Someone had taken them. Callan reached for his phone and called the station. The man who answered was Deputy Orrin Vale, 46 years old, Callan's longtime friend, and a deputy with the Holofen Ridge Police Department. Orrin had worked beside Callan for years and had been quietly helping him track reports of missing working dogs across the county. He was practical, loyal, and careful with words, the kind of officer who listened before he decided what mattered. "Orrin," Callan said, "I need you at my house, now." There was a pause. "Is Finn all right?" Callan looked at his son, kneeling among the blankets with Alder beside him. "He's cold, but he's all right. We found dogs under the Ashenbrook ice, 10 of them." "10? And most of their collars have been altered." Orrin's voice hardened. "I'm on my way." While they waited, Callan gave Finn a dry sweatshirt and wrapped his hands in clean gauze. Finn allowed it. He did not pull away. That alone made Callan's chest ache more than he expected. "You did good tonight," Callan said quietly. Finn looked down. "Alder found me." "Maybe," Callan said, "but you followed him. That matters." Finn did not answer, but he stayed. Alder shifted, lifting his head toward the front door before anyone heard the vehicle outside. A minute later, headlights swept across the window, and Orrin Vale came in, carrying a field kit and a heavy winter coat dusted with snow. He stopped when he saw the living room. 10 dogs lay across the floor in blankets, their breaths uneven but steady. Alder was closest to Finn. Orrin's face tightened. "Callan?" "I know," Callan said. Orrin knelt by the nearest dog and checked the collar, then another. By the third, his jaw had set. "These are not strays." "No," Callan said. "Some are K9, some rescue. Their IDs were removed." Orrin opened his field notebook. "We've had reports from 3 counties. Working dogs missing. A retired K9 from Helena. 2 search dogs from a volunteer unit. A Malinois from a private handler." Finn's eyes moved to the dogs around him. "Someone stole them?" Orrin looked at him carefully, remembering he was speaking to a child. "That's what it looks like." Callan stood near the fireplace, his face grim. "The tracks near the river. There were sled marks, too. They didn't fall in by accident." Orrin nodded slowly. "Then someone dumped them or lost control of them near the ice." At the mention of that possibility, Alder suddenly rose. His blanket slipped from his shoulders. A low growl built in his chest, not loud, but deep enough to make every dog in the room lift its head. Callan turned toward him. "What is it?" Orrin looked at Alder, then at Callan. "There's one name that keeps coming up in the reports." Callan's eyes hardened. "Silas Crow." Silas Crow was a local dog trader in his 50s who ran an old kennel property outside Holofin Ridge. Officially, he bought and sold working dogs. Unofficially, Callan had suspected him for months, but suspicion was not proof. Alder growled again at the name. His ears flattened. His body went rigid, and he stared toward the dark windows as if the sound of that name had opened a door inside his memory. Finn moved closer to him. "Alder?" The dog did not look away from the window. Orrin spoke quietly. "I think he knows that name." Callan looked at Alder, then at the scraped collars, then at the exhausted dogs lying across his living room. The case that had taken Alder years ago had come back into his house, dripping river water onto his floor. Only now, it had also brought Finn back to his voice. Callan reached for his radio. "Orrin, get photos of every collar. I want every mark documented before anyone moves them. Then we follow those sled tracks." Finn looked up quickly. "I'm going too." Callan turned to him. For a moment, the old fear of losing someone rose in him. Then he looked at Alder, who had placed himself beside the boy again, steady despite the pain. "Not tonight," Callan said. "Tonight, we keep them alive." Finn wanted to argue, but one of the dogs whimpered. He looked down, adjusted the blanket around it, and stayed where he was. Alder lowered himself beside Finn, still watching the window. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Inside, the Mercer living room glowed with firelight, wet fur, quiet breathing, and the first real evidence of a darkness that had been hiding in Holofin Ridge for years. The Mercer living room stayed warm long after the fire settled into red coals. 10 rescued dogs lay across the floor in blankets, breathing in uneven but steady rhythms. Some slept deeply, too exhausted to lift their heads. Others watched the room with tired eyes, as if they still could not believe the river was behind them. Near the hearth, Alder lay beside Finn, his old body wrapped in a faded quilt, his head resting close to the boy's knee. Deputy Orrin Vale had stepped outside to make calls from his patrol truck. At 46, Orrin was both a deputy and one of Callan's oldest friends in the Holofin Ridge Police Department. He was gathering reports, requesting help from neighboring counties, and checking old complaints tied to Silas Crow's kennel. His voice carried faintly through the walls now and then, low and serious beneath the wind. Inside, Callan moved quietly from dog to dog. He checked breathing, adjusted blankets, and set bowls of warm water near the ones strong enough to drink. His pants were still damp from the river, and exhaustion showed in the slow way he stood after kneeling. But he did not stop. Finn watched him from the floor, noticing details he might have ignored before. The way Callan touched each dog gently, the way he kept his voice calm, the way his hands shook only when he thought no one was looking. For years, Finn had imagined his father as two different people. One was Officer Callan Mercer, the man everyone trusted, the man who wore a badge and knew what to do in emergencies. The other was the father who had not come home in time for Laurel. Finn had never known how those two could be the same man. Tonight, after the river, after the rope, after watching Callan almost fall through the ice, that old certainty felt less solid. Alder shifted and placed his head fully on Finn's leg. Finn looked down. "You're heavy," he whispered. Alder gave a tired breath through his nose, almost like a sigh. Callan heard the whisper. He turned slightly but said nothing. He had learned not to rush Finn's words when they came. For 4 years, words had been rare in this house. Tonight, they seemed to arrive like shy animals at the edge of the woods, and Callan was afraid one wrong movement might send them running. Finn rubbed one hand along Alder's damp fur. The dog's body was still cold in places, though warmth was slowly returning. His left ear twitched when Oren's truck radio crackled outside. "Dad," Finn said. Callan stopped beside the fireplace. The words still hit him softly, painfully, like light through a cracked door. "Yeah?" Finn kept his eyes on Alder. "That night, when Mom died." Callan did not move. The room seemed to quiet around them. Even the dog slept more still, as if the house itself knew what had finally stepped into the open. Finn swallowed. "Why didn't you come?" The question was not loud. It was not angry in the way Callan had expected for years. That made it harder. It sounded like something a little boy had been holding alone for too long. Callan sat down slowly on the floor across from him. He did not sit in the chair above him. He did not stand like an officer giving a report. He sat where Finn could see his face. "I tried," Callan said. Finn's jaw tightened. Callan nodded once, accepting that those 2 words were not enough. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it never could, but I need you to hear the whole truth." Finn said nothing, but he did not look away. Callan took a breath. "That night, I was following a truck we believed was connected to the stolen working dogs. K9s, rescue dogs, dogs like the ones we pulled out tonight. Alder was already missing by then. We thought that truck might lead us to him." Alder's ears moved at the sound of his name. Callan looked at the old German shepherd, then back at Finn. "I had been chasing that case for weeks. I thought if I found the dogs, I might find Alder. I thought I could stop whoever was taking them before more disappeared." Finn's fingers tightened in Alder's fur. "Then the call came about your mom," Callan said, and his voice changed. "I turned around right away. I left the pursuit. I didn't think about the case or the truck or anything else. I only thought about getting to her, getting to you." The fire popped softly. The storm was already bad. The county road was nearly buried. About 3 miles from the clinic road, the hillside gave way. Snow and trees came down across the route. I tried to get through on foot, but the wind was too strong. Oren and 2 others found me trying to dig through with my hands. Finn looked up then. Callan's eyes were wet, but his voice stayed steady. "By the time we found another way around, it was too late." For a long moment, Finn only stared at him. Callan did not defend himself. He did not say people had told him it was not his fault. He did not say he had done everything possible. Those things might have been true, but truth could still be useless when a child had lost his mother. "I should have been there," Callan said. "That's what I have lived with every day. I should have been there for her, and I should have known how to be there for you after." Finn's face began to crumple, but he fought it. "Everyone said you were helping people." "I was," Callan said, "but that didn't make it hurt less. Not for you, not for me. You kept wearing the badge." "I did. I hated that." Callan nodded. "I know." Finn's voice shook. "I thought if you really loved her, you would stop. I thought you would stop being the person who wasn't there." The words landed hard, but Callan did not turn from them. "I kept wearing it because I didn't know who I was without it, and because if I stopped helping people, then that night would take even more from us. But I understand why it looked different to you." Finn wiped his face quickly, angry at the tears, but unable to stop them. "I thought you chose the job." "I chose your mom the second I got that call," Callan said. "I just didn't reach her in time." That was when Finn broke, not loudly, not suddenly. His shoulders folded inward, and the tears came as if they had been waiting for years to be allowed. Callan moved closer, slowly enough to let Finn pull away if he wanted. Finn did not pull away. Callan put an arm around him, and the boy leaned into him with a small, wounded sound that seemed to come from the 8-year-old still trapped inside the 12-year-old body. Alder lifted his head, pushed himself between them, and laid his muzzle across Finn's lap. His warm breath touched both of them. For the first time in 4 years, Finn cried with his father beside him, instead of across the room from him. "I miss her," Finn whispered. Callan closed his eyes. "I miss her too. I was mad at you. I know. I'm still mad." "That's okay," Callan said. "You can be mad. You can ask me anything. You don't have to disappear to make it hurt less." Finn leaned against him harder. Outside, Oren's voice faded as he finished another call. Somewhere beyond the windows, the Ashenbrook River kept moving under the ice, dark and restless. Inside the cabin, the living room smelled of wet fur, smoke, soup, and old grief finally breathing. Alder stayed between them, quiet and steady, as if Laurel's old words had become real in the firelight. Alder always knows when a heart is hurting, and tonight he had found two. By midnight, the storm had weakened, but the work was not finished. The rescued dogs slept in blankets across the Mercer living room, while the fire burned low and steady. Finn sat beside Alder, one hand resting on the old K9's shoulder. Callan stood near the window with Deputy Oren Vale, 46, his longtime friend and fellow officer, watching the snow settle over the yard. Outside, the tracks from the river were still visible, and beyond them, the trail of the sled marks cut through the woods like a dark answer waiting to be followed. Oren lowered his phone after another call with the station. "Backup is on the way, but it'll take time. Roads are bad." Callan nodded. "The tracks may be gone by morning." Finn looked up. "Then you have to go now." Callan turned toward him. A few hours earlier, he would have told Finn to stay out of it without thinking. Now the words caught in his throat. His son had pulled Alder from the ice. He had helped save 9 more dogs. He had spoken the truth after 4 years of silence. Still, he was only 12. "You stay here," Callan said gently. "You and Alder have done enough." Alder lifted his head at the sound of his name. His ears turned toward the window. Then he pushed himself to his feet. Finn frowned. "He wants to go." "No," Callan said. "He's hurt." But Alder was already moving. Slow, unsteady, wrapped in the old quilt, he crossed the room and stood at the door. He did not bark. He only looked back at Callan with the same focused stare he had used years ago before a search. The message was clear. He knew where the trail led. Callan knelt beside him. "You remember that place, don't you?" Alder's body stiffened. Oren's face darkened. Silas Crow's kennel. Silas Crow was 54 years old, a local dog trader who owned a rundown property beyond the North Ridge. On paper, he bought and sold working dogs for farms and private security. In truth, Callan had suspected him for months of moving stolen K9s and rescue dogs through Hollofen Ridge. Suspicion had never been enough. Tonight, 10 half-frozen dogs and a room full of damaged collars had changed that. Callan made his decision. "Oren, we follow the trail. Finn stays here." Finn stood at once. "No! Finn! Alder won't leave me." His voice shook, but it did not disappear. "And I know the first part of the trail. If he falls, I can help him." Callan looked at the boy, then at Alder, who had moved back to Finn's side as if agreeing. Fear rose in Callan, old and sharp. But he saw something else, too. Finn was not asking to chase danger. He was asking not to be left behind in silence again. Callan took a breath. "You stay behind me at all times. You do exactly what I say." Finn nodded. "I will." They left the injured dogs warm inside, with Oren calling a local animal rescue volunteer to check on them as soon as the road cleared. Then Callan, Oren, Finn, and Alder followed the sled tracks into the woods. The night was cold, but the sky had opened enough for moonlight to silver the snow. Alder moved slowly at first, then with more certainty as they climbed toward the old logging road. Every few yards he lowered his nose, found the scent, and pressed forward. The kennel appeared beyond a stand of dark pines. It was a low, weathered property with sagging fences, 2 long sheds, and an old office cabin with 1 yellow light burning inside. A truck sat near the gate, its rear doors open. Several empty crates were stacked beside it. Oren whispered, "He's moving." Callan raised one hand, signaling Finn to stay low behind a fallen log. Finn crouched with Alder beside him. The dog's body trembled, but his eyes were fixed on the nearest shed. A man stepped from the office cabin carrying a folder and a flashlight. Silas Crow was broad-shouldered, dressed in a heavy work coat, and moved with the impatience of someone used to getting his way. He turned toward the truck and called to someone inside the shed, but no one answered. Callan stepped out from the trees. "Silas Crow!" Silas froze. Oren moved from the other side, flashlight raised. "Holofen Ridge Police, stay where you are." For a second, Silas only stared. Then his eyes shifted to Alder. The old German shepherd rose. Silas's face changed. It was quick, but Callan saw it. Recognition, fear, the kind a guilty man cannot hide fast enough. "You," Silas muttered. Alder growled low. Silas dropped the folder and ran. Oren went after him at once, but Silas cut around the truck and headed for the shed. Callan followed, calling for him to stop. Finn stayed where he was until Alder suddenly pulled away, not toward Silas, but toward the second shed. The dog barked once, sharp and urgent. Finn looked at Callan. "Dad!" Callan turned. Alder was pawing at the bottom of a loose wooden door. Oren kept Silas in sight near the truck. Callan rushed to the shed and forced the door open. The smell inside was cold, stale, and heavy. Finn lifted the flashlight. Along the wall were broken collars, torn tags, and stacks of papers stuffed into plastic bins. There were also empty cages, too many of them. Callan opened one folder, false transfer records, changed names, county numbers removed and replaced. Proof. "You found it," Callan said. Alder stepped in front of Finn, then barked toward the truck. Outside, Silas had reached the driver's door. Oren was closing in, but the snow slowed him. Silas climbed into the truck and started the engine. For one heartbeat, it looked like he might break through the gate. Then Alder barked. It was not loud like it had been years ago. It was rough, worn, and full of pain, but it carried across the yard. From far below the ridge, as if answering a command, the rescue dogs in the Mercer cabin began to bark. Their voices were faint at first, then stronger, carried by the cold night and the open valley. One by one, the dogs in Silas's yard, hidden in a rear pen Callan had not yet seen, began barking too. The sounds surrounded the property. Silas panicked. He slammed the truck into reverse, hit a snowbank, and the wheels spun uselessly. Oren reached the door, pulled it open, and brought him out into the snow. Callan crossed the yard and helped secure him. "It's over," Callan said. Silas looked past him at Alder, breathing hard. "That dog should have been gone." Callan's voice turned cold. He found his way home. Weeks later, Holofen Ridge gathered in the town hall for a small ceremony. The rescued dogs had been identified. Some returned to K-9 units. Some went back to search and rescue handlers. A few, too old or too wounded for service, found quiet homes with people who understood that loyalty did not end when work did. Callan stood in uniform beside Finn and Alder. The old German shepherd wore a new collar now, simple and strong, with his name clearly engraved. When the town applauded, Alder leaned against Finn's leg, unimpressed by human ceremony, but pleased by the boy's hand on his head. That evening, back at the Mercer cabin, Finn stood before the living room wall. He held an old photograph of Callan and Alder from the K-9 unit, the first clear picture he had ever really studied of the dog his mother once spoke about. He hung it beside a new photograph taken by the Ashenbrook River. Callan, Finn, and Alder standing together in the snow. Finn stepped back and looked at both pictures. "I still want to be brave like you, Dad," he said softly. "But I want to be kind like Mom, too." Callan pulled him close, holding him as if the years between them had finally loosened their grip. Alder pressed his head between them, old, tired, and home at last. Outside, winter still covered Holofen Ridge. But inside the Mercer cabin, the silence had broken. The house had found its voice again. In the end, this story is not only about 10 dogs rescued from beneath the ice. It is about a father and son who had been trapped in a different kind of cold, the silence left behind by grief. Callan could not change the night he lost Laurel, and Finn could not erase the pain of growing up without his mother. But through Alder's loyalty, they both learned that love does not always return loudly. Sometimes it comes back trembling at the door, covered in snow, asking us to open our hearts one more time. The message of this story is simple but powerful. Even when a family is broken by loss, healing can still begin when someone chooses courage, forgiveness, and love. Alder reminded them that loyalty never forgets the way home, and that sometimes the ones who save us are the ones we once thought were lost forever. What do you think about Finn, Callan, and Alder's story? Do you believe some animals can sense the pain we try to hide? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and tell me where you are watching from today. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to support the next videos. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you again in the next story.